kind of, oh, I get to be the first one recording. Fun.
Yeah.
So I did kind of a weird shift and I tried to incorporate as much as I could in my educational practice from what I've learned before, but it's really hard because it's a very controlled system. And then recently I was like, oh, I need to get back into that again. So I found Into and Thinking Network. Loved it. I found that online and saw this and was like, this is great to jump back into this. So I'm excited.
Bill Wells, you're muted.
Yes,
Oh,
I was discovering the brightness of the light, but I got to know Dr. Deming through Jack Kilrick, who I'd go see Jack Kilrick, who would talk to him after watching Field of Dreams, and I was curious about quality, continuous improvement, so I'd get to attend a Deming conference in St. Louis in the early 90s. And the part of it that made it really strange for me is having experienced mental illness. I was an intern at that conference, and I asked him about mental illness, and he paused a minute, and he then replied in a stout voice, well, you either mark them up once a day, plus or minus. So I sat down and said, he's right. And of course, you start doing continuous improvement. You're wondering where a bell curve does not exist. And gradually, what was strange too is to be rejected so many times when you're trying to participate. I was schooled in planning, regional resource planning from Waterloo, and I'm from Little Rock originally. I worked in Watergate that night. Dad's classmate was Wilbur Mills from college. And it's just strange where you just want to keep learning, but how do you integrate a certain way of learning into systems when people can be pointing fingers at each other? So for me, I tend to ask questions because I was intrigued with the concept of thermodynamics or social thermodynamics. And it's just the words could be too abstract for people, but then people will say, well, we don't have to listen to you. So when you think of all the materials that go into making a system, and oddly, I would be at a mental health conference outside the Pentagon in the early 90s too. It's you're trying to figure out, well, how could the thinking advance where it's sustained at this level of inquiry and being able to ask the questions that need to be asked, particularly now. First for career job after I'd majored in biology in college was to work in a bank, a small state bank in Arkansas, and I realized it wasn't what I was wanting to do, but I sort of discovered the nature of numbers in motion. But it's not just a quantitative number, the qualities, complexity, mapping data, and I gradually turned towards art. I received that degree in Chicago, where I used to pass through there on the way to Canada, but I've just view nature and wonder if it's more of a cosmos question. And recently I discovered a woman by the name of Temple Grandin, who's going to be presenting here. She's of the autistic spectrum, but just a brilliant lady. And part of her ability to pursue and create knowledge and show anyone can learn. It's how do you uh, intervene into a system or raise expectations to where everyone can create value and meaning. So that's it in a nutshell.
somebody else who joined. And Jason, you haven't introduced yourself, and it looks like somebody else joined, but I don't see the name.
Hey, this is Lakshmi.
Oh,
Thank,
welcome.
thank
We
you.
got we yeah, as long as you got the phone running, it took me a long time to get mine running. Introduce yourself and your level of experience with Dr. Deming's work, if you will.
Yep, sure. My name is Lakshmi Subaraya. I'm based. I live in New Jersey. Um, and I haven't have a lot of experience doing work, but I do interact with Bill Bellows on and off. I listen to his uh, podcast on the Deming uh, podcast series, so that's how I got introduced to him, and then we interact. And yeah, I'm just trying to learn, and I do have some experience in other holistic methodologies like theory of constraints.
Oh,
um, so yeah, there's a lot of close uh, kind of parallels with the Deming philosophy. So all the holistic philosophy, I try to keep myself updated. Yeah, for my profession, I work in a software product company which does a supply chain products. So I am a solution architect. Yeah, thank
thanks
you.
and welcome. Jason, how about you?
Hello, Jason Hamilton from the Toronto, Canada area. Introduced to Deming, must have been 2014, 2015. I started going to meetups in Toronto. Chris Chapman was holding systems thinking. I think we had Bellows in for a 3-day course as well. I love that. Um, I'm a business owner. I'm in the soft. I have a soft. I own a software testing agency, and that's the reason why I was really interested to learn more about quality and what the meaning of quality was. And then through the eyes of Deming and Taguchi and all that sort of stuff, uh, it just looked like the rest of the world has a different meaning, and they're like and the way that they spoke about business and teams and it was just exactly what I needed because I just felt like everything else just didn't make sense. And I actually found Deming makes sense for me, anyways. And then how I run my business, it just flows through everything. And I'm still learning. And it's actually been a while. They've stopped the meetups for years now. So once I saw this, I was like, okay, I'm jumping on this. I need a refresher. I need to get back into it. It's almost like I've lost my way a little in the last few years.
It's interesting. I'll note that having conducted a lot of these and reading the book over 100 times, I always find it amazing that I'll read through, and if I've read the book 100 times, you would think the 101st I wouldn't see anything new, and there it
Exactly.
is. So where the hell did that come from? So
Yep. Yep.
it's not that you lose things, it's that you learn things, which allows you to see things you haven't seen before. And
Absolutely.
I just find it fascinating. That's why I have learned so much running these and listening to other people talk. I can't believe how valuable that is to have people explain their view of things, and that sparks something in my head. And I say, "Oh, I never thought of that. That's really clever. How can I use that in what I'm doing?" Well, let's talk about the introductory stuff, the forewords and the preface and the about the author. Anything there strike you?
Seeing that
All up.
everyone is staying quiet, I think for me, what continues to strike, and I want to build on what Jason had said earlier in terms of this whole rethinking of quality. You see regularly a lot of us start to think of quality as something the quality department does. And when you read through the new economics, it is not talking anything about the quality department or just the work of the quality department. This is, and I don't even like to frame it simply as big Q. It is probably even bigger Q because you're talking about the economics of things. You're talking about how people learn, how people interact with systems. And I think that that in itself that foundation for this is about building up transformation and this commitment to profound knowledge. I think that is thing because when you look at the chapter one, kind of laying out this context of what is the problem, how well we misunderstand quality, how we have faulty um insights and theories about leadership and management and how to do those properly. You would see that even from since the time when this book was written, and even from the context that it was written before, you'll realize that we still have the prevailing style of management today. It's so dominant that persons can't make the shift. Sometimes we even are afraid to make the shift because fear and command and control has been built in and ingrained in us. That we then tend to look for a step-by-step approach or a manipulative type of approach. So I think that for me, in terms of the foundations, and I really wanted to build on what Jason had mentioned in terms of that whole rethinking of quality. It's not what everybody else is talking about in their quality book, like, or what the quality engineering department does, or that's what the quality department does. It's about leadership, economics, and a transformation of society because it was also talking about the education system and how we teach and how we learn and how we transfer knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned transformation, and I think that's certainly Myron Tribus and Deming talk about transformation, and Russ Akoff talks about transformation. And what is interesting to me in the about the author, Deming got a PhD in mathematical physics in 1928. Now, why that struck the chord with me for transformation is he was learning about physics right on the edge of moving from Newtonian deterministic, everything can be measured and precise, to a world of uncertainty and probability. He's talking about transformation is throwing everything out and looking at the world anew. And it's amazing that his transformation is, as far as I'm concerned, as dramatic as moving from Newtonian physics to the physics of Bohr and Einstein and others. It's it it allows you to see the world differently, and that allows you certainly to have more alternatives when you're making decisions about moving ahead.
I'm gonna jump on that because so I teach high school physics, but the big thing is AI is the beast for us. And for some reason, the push from my colleagues is very much of we can't have them use it, we can't have them use it, da 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 da. And I'm like, why can't we teach them how to properly use it and properly fact check? Like it is a thing that is going to happen and just be part of our society from now on in. And so I think I was one of the quotes somewhere. I was like, the purpose of school should be to prepare students for the future, not for the past. And I feel like admin in the school district is I don't know, they're just trying to stop and they're like, everybody go back to pen and paper. And that's not what I want to do in my own classroom.
Didn't that happen with calculators? Wasn't that the
Probably.
same push? I read that somewhere.
The thing I noticed, I taught school for 8 years, math and English in high school, and and I discovered that the school system itself is a really strong rubber band, and you can do stuff to pull yourself away, but by gosh, if you take a breath, it snaps right back to where it was. Bingo! It is so hard, and I don't know why. And as you pointed out, Nicole, we're supposed to be preparing people for the future, and we do that by teaching him everything we did in the past. That doesn't make any sense. It's the,
Well,
so
maybe for history class, but
yeah, but
What do
Deb,
do you
Debbie used to complain
do?
about all of the masters and PhD degrees you could get in business and point out that what they were teaching those people who got those degrees is what worked in the past.
Yeah.
It, it doesn't have the fact that it worked yesterday has no impact on whether or not it's going to work tomorrow because things change. And I don't, the school system just doesn't have a way of dealing with that.
Well, the letters in PhD stand for past history degree. So,
I
yeah,
guess
So are we making history this evening?
everything we do
probably.
makes history.
You would
As
be
we
surprised.
become history.
Yes.
And then if that's happening, if you're creating it, I would recall traveling from Waterloo up to Toronto, out to York University to be in an audit class with Eric Trist. And there was a book a student shared with us, Maps of the Mind, but the oddity is to understand from Waterloo the incredible ecological planner Bob Dorney would came from Michigan, and so Waterloo would be the first to put ecology with regional resource planning, just city planning. So, how many view the system they're in as an ecology, actually affirming life and understanding the implications of using energy? And the other person in the faculty, one of them was Lynn Gertler, whose son went on to become the president of the University of Toronto. And I don't know if this helps anchor the discussion any better, but it's just amazing when the article, I mean, about social thermodynamics was given to me in the second two pages where it's about economics being taught by a man from Romania at Vanderbilt, but it's really trying to get at the qualities. And so when you think about the richness of qualities, and when I go see the man who would repair my flash drive, he said, well, AI, it's only objective. So how do you process, and how would Deming have processed the subjective aspects of the 100% of the existence, being that we only get to, I guess, process 3%? It's the other 97% we can open up or try to improve.
Yeah, that's it's Deming talks about knowledge and knowledge for change. And knowledge for change might be informed by the past, but it requires something other than the past. If you keep doing what you've done in the past, there's no hope. You have to try something different. And I think one of the things I found from reading Deming the first time in maybe 1990 is I knew stuff was wrong. When I was in school, I knew stuff was wrong with school. And when I was teaching, I knew stuff was wrong with it. And I was really good at poking the people in charge and making them see how what they were doing was ridiculous on several levels. Not that I had any ideas how to help them change it. And I didn't really know what was wrong. I just knew something was wrong. And then I read the new economics and I said, now I have a language and a way to explain what is wrong and what we could do instead. And I think that what we could do instead, Deming offers us, and it starts with chapter 1, but it goes on through the book. He offers us a way to look at the things around us and see things in a way we didn't see them before, which opens up alternatives of action we can take. And that reminds me that taking action is Gerald Suarez, back in one of the early Into and Thinking forums, who was an advisor to the president at the time, came in and gave a presentation, and he said, we seem to view ourselves as standing in the presence, and the future's out and it's on this river coming toward us, and it just sort of rushes past us. And he says, and we think we're helpless. And he said, but you have to come to he offered the idea that what you ought to think about is that it's not so much a river and we're helpless, is that we're standing here and things are coming toward us And we're standing here now in the present, and what comes and gets to us in the future depends on what we do now. And so what we need to be looking at is what can we do now and see what that results in the future. And it's a choice. We can decide we're not going to look, we're not going to do anything. That's fine. Or we can choose, which is to use what we've done in the past, take things that are complicated and break them down to individual pieces and then work on improving the pieces separately. That's hopeless. It's not even effective with a mechanical system, let alone a social system. It's terrible. We, and part of it's the Industrial Revolution, have separated everything into pieces that used to be together. Russ Akoff talks about education, learning and playing and working. All used to happen together interactively at the same time. Now we got different institutions for each one of those. So when you're working, you're not supposed to learn a damn thing, and you're certainly not supposed to have any fun. And when you're having fun, you shouldn't be working and you shouldn't be learning. It's crazy.
But people will ask you, where do you work? And there's a different way I hear that if I'm up in the New England area, or even here, people have said, where do you work? As though it's a puritanical part. But really, I think the art to try be an artist, you surrender into realizing the pencil is or the paintbrush is smarter than me, but it's more of a play. So there might be a need to redefine the term work, play. I mean, it's a space that I think Deming was just incredible to be at a meeting with him and his humor. I mean, it's just the way he could, his speech, he had the audience, and then you open it up. And you could ask questions without being punished.
One of my favorite Deming things is I got a video clip of it because I recognized working with Deming's help. I recognize reading Deming afterwards. I looking at what we're doing in the corporation, what we're doing in school, and recognizing some of the difficulty. And I discovered one of the things that happens is we don't know the purpose of what we're doing. And everything starts from purpose. If you don't know the purpose, Deming used to say with executives who have got all this data they want to study, and he says, you don't even know what data you need to study until you know what you're trying to learn. What's the purpose? If you don't understand purpose, you're lost. And Deming, as far as I'm concerned, has given us a purpose. The purpose is to the purpose is to look at the world in a way that you can affect it, that helps everybody. And it involves the four things he's got in System of Profound Knowledge. And I, I always liked the system. I played soccer in college. I was one of three American-born players on my team. That's how old I am. And
How
the
young.
thing I found really enjoyable about soccer is how what a team kind of a thing it is. Any sport is, but when you get 10, 11 people on each side out there, it's a lot easier to see the system part of what's going on. And interestingly enough, my 1968, my junior year, I won most valuable player, and I'm thinking, what the hell does that mean? There are 11 people running around on the field, and that doesn't make any sense. And then I'm listening to television broadcasts, basketball games, and football games, and soccer matches, and I hear the soccer commentators talking about two things. One is how many shutouts a goalie has. And I played goalie for a while, and I said that the goalie getting a shutout has a lot to do with who's playing in front of him and whether they're letting him shoot at him. So it's not really a goalie statistic. And the other one is the idea of the winning goal. So, well, if the score is 1-0, I know the winning goal. If it's 5-4, I don't know which one of those is a winning goal because without the other four, you don't win. It's and yet the dominating concept is everything separate. And so there is a winning goal. There is a most valuable player, but it makes no sense.
Yeah. One of the things that I was like reflecting as you're speaking is like about the future, right? Like you brought Nicole was talking about AI. So it's all more like a technology perspective, futuristic, but when we talk about management paradigms, like how the companies run, it's pretty old school. Like we may be like more than 100 years back. Like where
Yeah.
is the scientific thinking in that realm? All the newness is only in the technology, and technology keeps coming at us at rapid pace, but organizational ways of doing things are very, very outdated. And sometimes I'm really disappointed in that every time a new technology comes, but it's still same thing, right? Like lay off people, and that organization thinking is never keeps pace with the technology. So that's the sad part for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Tim too. I want to probably also join in. Just building on that from the previous speaker, because I think one of the things that Deming sort of also kind of framed in helping us to think about this systems and these new dimensions of quality is also this supposition that technology or gadgets or automation in and of itself is going to improve quality, right? So even as we think about AI, we just talk about is a history, but AI actually is actually working on history too, right? Because it's actually using previous information and probably might even be replicating some of the bad practices of the past in new ways. And I think for educators, some of the educators, where the challenge comes in is this whole question of are the students really learning? You know, but if I also build from what Russell Acuff also spoke about, is that teaching is a horrible way to inspire learning. Sometimes it actually gets in the way, but while teaching is also a great way to learn in of itself, because as the teacher, you yourself, in your preparation and all of those other things and in the interaction with your students, you actually learn. So I think from the when we try to take on the Deming lens in the organization, we also recognize, I think if we look at well in the third edition, page 10, where they talk about, some of the answers and solutions to quality, all of these suggestions that are all insufficient and all sometimes even bring negative results when you try to bring about change, where you talk about automation, new machinery, more computers, more gadgets, hard work. All of these suggestions are all part of the faulty management perspective and theory that is informing the way that we run our organizations, the way that we run the learning, ranking people, and all of these things, zero defects, how we define quality, and how we define the aim of the organization that has led to um, obscure results, and a lack of learning. You know, um, in fact, sometimes, we do come back to seeing this whole perspective as to how important learning is, or how important it is to innovate. And also, when we think about the system, the Deming lens will also speak about systems also, not only in the aim and this web of interdependence, but also the future and the recognition too that cause and effect may not be linked to time and place, because you would see where he mentioned you could date it's not to date the decline, to date when the decline, to date an earthquake, when the decline actually started, it's very difficult for you to actually do so. So you may see the decline today, but it may be the result of actions that were taken long before or perpetuated long before. So, I think what is important in the understanding of systems and appreciating systems is even recognizing that you have to first appreciate that this system of profound knowledge in and of itself is a system, and you have to start to appreciate systems to properly understand how this system helps you to see differently and think differently, and then not just react to um to every new fad or every new solution or every new technology as in and of itself a solution without probably the social interactions and all of these other things, because there are several metaphors too that also helps us to understand, the organization as a system. Several are used within the book. But for us to really build appreciation, we really have to do a lot of work on the understanding of systems. I just felt that I could share that insight because I think because when they go in page, well, third edition, page 10, they also go further to talk about why the fallacies of these suggestions listed above, you know, why they actually tend to lead to some of the negative results that we see, so um, there is something more that is needed in applying these solutions. It's not to say that sometimes these solutions in themselves are inherently bad, but we need to apply the profound knowledge that is required within the context.
What I found interesting over the years is that with all the people that have joined these conversations and all the different places they work, and what's fascinating is the vast majority of us, probably 95 or more percent, work for the same organization. It's run the same way, it's set up the same way, as all the same vulnerabilities. It's fascinating. I remember having a guy from Goodwill was part of one of the discussions, and I was saying, wow, well, with all this rewards and pushing different parts of the organization to improve and then rewarding them if they improve and going through all that. I said, well, that's the profit-driven motive. You're a Goodwill. Maybe you can share with us what you guys do because you're not governed by profit. And he said, yeah, but we do the same thing. We have the regions competing with each other, and we send out awards to which regions do the best, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, this is, oh my gosh, it's nearly hopeless. And the only hope is that, and Deming calls his system a system of profound knowledge, indicating he doesn't think it's the only one. It's his, but systems, Deming and other people involved in looking at the world differently and being able to use that different look to advance us. And I think the thing that I saw in school a lot, and I saw here even at Rocketdyne and even at NASA, is the downside of doing what we've been doing is what Deming calls destroying our people. Holy cow! I I I cannot imagine how people feel. I remember talking to I reported the VP of quality for a while, and one day I came in the office and his secretary, who was usually relatively happy, looked really down, and I asked her, I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, I don't like this time of the year. And I said, "What do you mean this time of the year?" And she said, "Today is Admin of the Year Day." And she said, I don't understand how they can, split us up, if you will, and pick an admin of the year and reward that admin. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, I know. I said, the only solace I can offer you is they're not making you feel bad on purpose. And she said, it doesn't matter, it hurts anyway. And that just stuck with me. Doesn't matter, they're not doing it on purpose. I'm still hurt.
Yeah, we for 10 years I haven't really done any one-on-ones with my employees, but I always get one or two wanting one. Then I say, okay, let's go talk. And it always ends with um, uh, they've done such great work that they want a bonus. And it's like, okay, what's the purpose here? Your purpose is different than my purpose. And this is why we don't do because there's something wrong here. Um, and just going back, listening through, um, when looking at grades, for example, why were my grades always different? And then I realized after reading the book and going through the trainings, it's like, oh, okay, the grades are not mine. Like they say my name on it, but it's really the instructors. Because I've been doing this, my work throughout the whole process, but the grades have always been different, like wildly different. So when I was teaching as well, I was a professor for a couple of years, and this was actually before I read Deming. I was trying to have everyone do well in the class. And then I realized afterwards, when they really didn't want to call me back, they wanted a bell curve. So they wanted me to fail people. And it was like, I can't be part of this.
Yep, yep. I remember Deming talking, a Deming participant in a 4-day seminar asked the question saying, well, Dr. Deming, you told us you don't want us to do performance reviews. What should we do instead? And Deming says, instead. So instead means you think there's a better way to destroy your people and humiliate them. Says I can't think of a better way. Depends on what your purpose is. So what else strikes you in the first two chapters? He wrote that How Are We Doing 30 years ago. And back then it, by comparison to now, I don't know how much better we're doing now.
What struck me was the fascination with like a number, and it's still there, probably even stronger than I've ever seen it now. Just a number for something. Like yeah, for performance, but also for quality. Like they want to see a number. It's like, what does that number mean? We don't know, and we don't know how to improve upon it, but we want to see that number. And it has to be better than the last time, otherwise you're fired.
Yeah.
And it's tied to performance and bonuses, and but no one knows what that number really means. That's what that's what I really got from rereading the first couple chapters. That stuck out. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
The concept that he has, I remember I saw somebody had the quote, in God we trust, all others bring data. And they attributed it to Deming. And I said, no, that doesn't make any sense. So, but I looked online and it's all over the damn place and attributed to Deming. Then I found two guys in San Francisco who wrote a book, and in the intro, they had that quote attributed to Deming and said, we couldn't find any evidence that he had anything to do with this quote. So we looked around Stanford, and because we thought maybe it was one of the guys that was from here before, we can't find anywhere for it. And you look at the statement, Deming didn't have objections to data. He just thought you needed data that was useful and you needed to know what you were going to use it for before you went out and ran after the data. And then I remember him very clearly saying, he said, anybody who runs this company by the figures alone will soon have neither figures nor a company. Because the most important figures are unknown and unknowable. Like, how happy are your damn people? And are they willing to put forth extra effort? And are they going to continue to be innovative, et cetera?
So if one goes back to the discussion about the sport, I'm curious from when I worked in the bank, and it was a time when the bank's ledger sheets would be manually posted, and the banker would still read this 2 foot by 3 foot manually posted sheet, but we would send the most of the work to Little Rock to be processed by systematics. And what was fascinating to me was the check and seeing machine and code the number. You had a routing number, you had the account number. But when my mind was beginning to go from super depression to super mania, then how much energy is lost up the smokestacks or in a fireplace when your air in a room is drawn out and you're thinking thermodynamics. I'd have a short class in college about this, but when you look at the advancement from the 70s to today's constant coding, ever advanced data being pushed around and clearing, which is sent through a radio signal potentially, but they're undersea cables too. What was strange to me, last year I'd go to Krakow for a conference on violence in clinical psychiatry, but the echoing comments, and I might have mentioned Deming, but they were saying we want more data. It wasn't better data. So how do you learn who is your client? I mean, who is the customer, and how does the thinking begin to awaken in people to realize how unique each citizen is or each animal? And when you look at nature, how does it assemble where it's not just exhausting, I guess, the flow of energy or materials, but it's configured to around a question of design. Because for me at least, when I've been in places that I thought were designed really a lot better, it was a great experience to be that. And over when I went over there, I'd also go down to Vienna to see Boltzmann's cemetery gravesite and Mozart and Beethoven. But to realize I do this stuff, but I was told to go away. I really feel as if working, everyone's working on this phone call, and the technology is working too, whether it actually transmits really well or poor. How does it? How does one improve it when you think cosmos or where are you connected? What's happening inside every human being? Are we getting better or worse? And then how do you improve the various systems by which somebody can really enjoy their life rather than see their farm collapse, their town blow away? They can, just pick up and migrate. Where I taught school in Delta for a year, their water system went bunks this last year, but it's where the King Biscuit Blues Festival is. And you look at Arkansas, a very powerful major box retailer in northwest Arkansas, but you go into the Delta, it's a huge farming people, and yet there's still people that live there. It's just the oddity of living in a poor state, some very wealthy businesses, but the actual public governance may not be what it could be. And so you try to think systems. How do you improve? Which pieces are more critical to where you begin to see a shift, I would say, for the betterment of humanity?
Yeah, certainly, at least in my opinion, applying Deming's filter to what you're looking at offers a really big opportunity to help the individual people and the organization as a whole. It's amazing. And what's really amazing to me is I wonder what his system would look like today, because this is 30 years ago, and his system would have changed by now. I don't know exactly in what ways, but it wouldn't be stable. And I remember somebody handing out at one of the Deming Institute meetings. It wasn't the Institute, it was somebody, on the side running around handing out little uh, wrist bracelets that said, "What would Deming do?" And my brain says, The question isn't what would Deming do? The question is, what are you going to do with the knowledge you have in your organization? So it's not about anybody else. You now have a different view. You can choose to use it or you can choose not to, but asking what somebody else would do is not, it's your organization. The question is, what are you going to do?
I think that's so important. What stands out for me, Tim, also is the preface. The entire preface stands out as a great foundation and a place to start in the reading. Because you know you sent out that little list of things to read in preparation for today's session. And in rereading the preface, several things stood out for me. Um, just the whole question of, you know, this route to transformation being what is called profound knowledge. And then how that leads into the whole question of us not only appreciating systems, but knowledge about variation, theory and knowledge in terms of how we learn, what we learn, learning to learn, and helping others to learn as well.
And learning to
And
live.
learning to live and psychology. And you know, that's the other striking thing in chapter one, in that the whole purpose of organizations, Deming takes a different lens in terms of the purpose of our organization. You know, what we learn in business school is about profit and value for shareholders. But what Deming is talking about here is a win-win sort of relationship where people live a positive quality of life, right? And I think in when you come to the section on have we been living off of the fat, I think for me is, to me, tracing the first and foremost kind of a discussion about sustainability from a management perspective, in the sense that he kind of goes on in the living off of the fat as building our economy is solely based on non-renewable resources and utilizing non-renewable resources and not learning, you know. And then I, you know, went and I read the production as a system, and then I realized that it was not only a matter of setting up a diagram that looks at the system map, but I was looking at some of the inputs. All of the inputs was continually flowing through the system back to a stage zero of redesign and reorganization, which means that nothing in the system that was fine, whether materials, equipment, or anything like that, was really moving through in a linear way. It was going through in a circular way. So I recognize that from very early. Deming was talking about a different economic model that was totally different from the linear model, and a solely linear model. And a striking statement also for me in the preface was the purpose of school, of a business school, should not be to perpetuate the present style of management, but to transform it. You know,
Exactly.
so I think those sort of stand out for me from the reading. But the second chapter, I think, kind of brings it home on this whole question of the faulty management practices and what Deming saw as a better way, um, as opposed to the faulty management practices of the management by objectives or the short-term thinking, or, you know, it kind of linked to the deadly diseases if I go back to the outer crisis, right? So the present practices of short-term thinking, and how do we shift to long-term thinking? How do we shift from management by objectives to management by planning, by management of engaging people? So it was, to me, is a whole different way of leading and managing that is also kind of linked now to how we achieve quality and how we think about quality and how we achieve it. That is, you're fundamentally different from the Tayloristic view and this view that the organization is a machine, kind of a viewpoint to more a social system, something dynamic, something where you could never fully appreciate or understand everything that's happening within the system. That's why you have to continually learn, improve, and innovate.
Yeah, Russ Acuff used to talk about the four different kinds of systems: mechanical, social, and individual, and ecological. He said, it's not wrong when your car breaks down to treat it like a mechanical system, but when your organization breaks down, treating it like a car is a bad idea. And I love Deming's continual push that the system includes the future. Because as near as I can tell, the future for most, certainly public traded corporations, is about 4 months. That's not the future, for heaven's sake. But yes, it is in the future. It's 4 months, but the question is, where are you going to be in 10 years? Like he brings up, what business are we in? What business do we want to be in 5 years? What business do we want to be in 10 years?
I think connected to that idea of the future also is the recognition that the boundaries of the system also change. And by changing these boundaries of what you consider to be the system in terms of your suppliers
Yes.
and your customers, the relationships with your suppliers and customers also change, and recognition that the customer could also be within your organization. So I think that those sort of ideas coming out in chapter 1 and 2, in terms of this sort of next person in the process as the customer, and the boundaries of the system also shifting, that changes the relationships. That is also a rethink from what was before, in the sense that you were just supplying for your customer, and there was no real need for like ongoing interaction beyond you make a sale. And the whole question of the what business you're in, I think that whole innovation around the carburetor, for instance, shows that you could be improving your efficiency, you could be improving your product over and over. You could be doing the wrong things right at, but then you could still lose the market if you don't really innovate. Because then you had the ice probably taken away. And if we go probably today, you may be looking at EVs probably taking away the market of even the ICE vehicles and so on. So, the what business you're in is so important to looking at into the future, and recognizing it's not just about the products that you make today or the services that you deliver today. There is probably a bigger purpose for your organization, and you have to know what that purpose is and how it makes life better um, for the people in the markets. And the market is now the world.
And as you pointed out, the system boundary may change. You have a purpose, and if you have an opportunity to do something and you examine your purpose and it doesn't fit in, then you're left with a choice of, do we want to change our purpose in order to include this, and how does that affect our new purpose? Or do we want to stay with the purpose we've got? And the great thing about boundaries is they exist in your head, so you can change them when you want. And when you change them, you can react to the change. It's and we at NASA helped change the boundary of what was a planet. And so Pluto's not a planet anymore. Now, that's okay, and you can use those boundaries and they're useful, but you don't know anything more about Pluto than you ever did by moving the boundary. But you now know how to manage whatever you're talking about. So the boundary, nature doesn't have boundaries. It just doesn't. We and our initial shot at science was to categorize everything. So we created a whole bunch of boundaries, got all these things. And boundaries have some use, but as soon as you create a category, you immediately create a category that's not that. So you have two categories, and then you get stuff along the border, like, is this a fork or a spoon? Well, it's a spork. Well, what category do you put that in? And instead of focusing on the categories, we ought to be focusing on what our purpose is. What are we trying to do? And if that's our purpose, how do we want to bound our system to achieve our purpose? And that's a question I don't think most corporations ask. I don't even think they're sure what their purpose is.
Do you sense that um, question of boundedness found from the floor up into management or CEO, a healthy organization, or is the boundedness reserved for just the uppermost administrator?
Well, if you're going to have a company that's going to be beneficial to the people who are part of it, beneficial to the people who they serve, and beneficial to the people who serve them, you're going to have to do something in order to draw the boundary in a way in which you can make that happen and establish your purpose and use and examine your purpose routinely and see if there's something you should be doing to help achieve your purpose more effectively. And since a whole bunch of companies don't have a purpose in the first place, they can't ask that question. And unfortunately, the prevailing style of understanding is that a for-profit company's purpose is profit. And as Russ Acuff pointed out, profit might be a necessary condition for its survival, but it's not its purpose. Its purpose is development, developing products, developing people, developing infrastructure, developing relationships. It's development. That's what the purpose of the organization is, not profit. Profits, it's like saying the purpose of man is to breathe in oxygen and exhale CO2. It's not his purpose. It's a necessary condition for survival. That's different. I remember challenging folks when I was in the school system, asking them what the purpose of school was. Got a lot of different answers. And since I was head of I was chief negotiator for the teachers for a couple of years. I spent every school board meeting I went to and sat and listened and paid attention, and then badgered them about things like, what do you think the purpose of the school is? And then I also badgered them one year because they were sharing their budget. Well, the first thing is they had me sitting there, but they didn't have any. They gave me the agenda and all the stuff that went with it, but they didn't give me a desk or a table. So it's really hard to deal with this. And I said, hey, could I have a desk? And they said, oh, yeah, sure. So the next time I had a desk, and then when they presented the budget that year, they started with a certain amount of money, and then they got the incoming money from the state and other places and the outgoing expenses. And at the end of the year, they had like a couple $100,000 more than when they started. And I said, is there some reason you're interested in making a profit this year? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, I don't know. You got $200,000 more to tag into the year than you started with. I said, that looks like a profit to me. They didn't have an answer and didn't pay much attention.
One of the issues is happening in Louisville now, certainly a couple of months ago, where I was driving out to neighboring county and I saw the police heading to the airport. It was the night the UPS plane fell apart.
Oh,
Back in the 90s when we moved here, I worked briefly for the Office of Economic Development as a planner, and the airport was being expanded for UPS's benefit, but I wondered about it, and really ended up being probably the larger relocation of over 1,500 families, a larger sort of realignment done in the US. And I would, after I'd been dismissed from the city, and I was curious about what was really going on, who was calling the shots. I, on my own nickel, flew up to Washington to go to the Department of Transportation to speak with the FAA. So when you look at something like the complexity of an airport, the building of it, and now with the Amazon, UPS, I mean, things are sort of gliding down as their corporate word now. But I would ask y'all, what do you think is happening within the business world if it's pulling back, but then think of the tax base or what maybe even in lieu of taxes, but how does a city have a school system when suddenly too they're struggling to even have a budget for this next year, and people trying to understand you can go to a board meeting, but it's not what's being said. It's the stuff that they sort of intuitively know, but the coalescence to have a healthier public discussion. But the reality is, people may be abandoning ship. They may be moving off or starting private homeschooling. But the volume vouchers and this other stuff that's going on, to think of what the sort of funds needed to have decent labs, decent art programs, it's just sort of, you're seeing an erosion of what was very vibrant in the beginning of, say, a Humana, the UPS expansion. Here's Churchill Downs, but it takes a lot to operate communities that are attracting attention and growing intelligence. And it's been strange to try to speak up for, I think, social justice or justice issues, and to put it in a context as a verb, because I was always intrigued with locomotion, the point, but how do you cross boundaries, but you show you can even peacefully assemble? You don't have to kill everybody trying to get into a football stadium or try to take off, I think, from a airport. But if the equipment is faltering, then how do you reset? It's not a reset like a computer, but something is in need of speaking some truth to power, I suspect. I was curious as how y'all are reading the situation, because the supply chains are dissolving and reemerging in different forms.
yeah, I'm not convinced that as much as it feels to a lot of individuals, no matter where they are and no matter what time on earth it is, that something special is happening at that moment. I think everything's been going pretty much the same as it's always been. And there are changes, and we'll call it progress. There are differences. But the fact is, if you're looking at just you in your little spot, I mean, this universe is damn big, and you're not a big part of it. So whatever's going on with you is kind of minuscule compared to what's going on. But you have people you can rely on. And if you don't have people to rely on, you need to build a network of people you can rely on so that you can talk. We used to tell people who came to some of our events that they should bring a friend, because if they heard these ideas and ran back to their place and they were the only those ideas, they get hammered down rather quickly. But if you have somebody else you can talk to about it, and you can commiserate, and you can even plan how you might expand the understanding of the ideas you have and get others to understand them too. So it's about building relationships. And I like the only way to change anything, especially anything as big as even a city government, is by everybody cooperating. So you need to find a way to generate the cooperation. And I think Deming has a lot of what Deming proposes help build community and better city government and better state governments. Um, but then again, it all starts with individuals, and if there's not an individual to start, then the thing ain't going anywhere. And that individual has to be persistent. And as Deming pointed out, if your light bulb goes on, then what you're going to be able to do is share with others and encourage them to move away from their old views and join the new ones. And he offers without feeling guilty or upset about the past. Because there are people, I know I've talked to people whose light bulbs went on. They said, I've been doing the wrong thing for 15 years. Oh my God, oh my God. I said, you haven't, don't worry about it. You were doing what you knew how to do with the knowledge you had. My kid is now 35, and does things that he did when he was 2. I'm upset. That makes sense. But when he was 2 doing those things, I wasn't upset with him because that's what he knew. So that's how he behaved. So it is hard though for people because to change, transform the way Deming is asking us to transform, you have to throw away a whole bunch of stuff you used to believe, and you took comfort in it. You took comfort in the fact that you can actually measure and understand a system and control it. The fact that you can't and have no chance, you're not willing to accept. I love Donella Meadows' concept. She said in her book, a primer, the primer on systems thinking, she says, you can't control the system, you can't understand the system, but you can learn to dance with it. And so that's what Deming offers of us a view so that we're not chained to one way of doing things, a view of the world that would allow us to see things, that would allow us to make changes so we can dance with the system as we start to understand it differently and better over time. And people I worked with, the people that I worked with Deming talked about the fact that they never saw a transformation in an organization that was a replica of a transformation in another organization.
Yep.
It's the it's not a recipe for pumpkin pie. Your organization and its transformation is going to be different from any other organization and its transformation. They may share these same ideas that Deming's talking about, but the transformation is going to be different because the organizations are different. The people involved are different. The interdependencies are different. And we seem to be looking for a one size fits all thing we can just plug in and go. And it doesn't exist.
The competencies are different, the capability is different, the leadership is different. But building on that too, I think what Bill said there to kind of, I think Deming also provides a sort of perspective in relation to not blaming our leaders even for some of their failed leadership or their failed management because they themselves don't know any better.
Yeah.
And like how could they know better? Because they also they come out of the same system. They live through the same system. So the way that they perceive leadership, the way that they perceive management is somewhat of the same. So yeah, making a shift from blame the worker to better appreciating the system and sometimes probably creating some sort of critical mass by changing individual by individual at a time, including your own self, because the transformation begins with the individual itself. But I think one of the things in these two chapters also that kind of stand out and build on that platform is even rethinking this whole illusions of progress, illusions of innovation, illusions of improvement. That what we would consider to be good enough in terms of like you know also in quality for some time, you'll go through the definitions, conformance to requirements or specifications, that is quality. Or um zero defects, that is quality. We're not making any mistakes at all. We chasing some sort of perfection or excellence or just customer satisfaction. That is enough. If we satisfy our customers, for long enough, they will continue to come back. But but what Deming is sharing here in these chapters is that none of these conditions is actually enough to attain quality or to sustain quality. We need to do much more than that. And we also have to recognize that there's also toxic innovation in the sense that there's innovation that actually may seem to be progress, but is actually not progressive. Um, and but yet still, we need to innovate and not just improve, because you could improve by just doing the right things wrong, huh? I think Bill does normally say, yeah, Bill say doing the right things wrong, huh? So you're improving on doing the wrong things right, huh?
Yeah.
So I think that, just that whole sort of different thinking also that applied in these two chapters, recognizing that quality is not a quick fix, as you just mentioned, is much deeper. You can't just copy what somebody else is doing and think that, oh, we're going to have a perfect system, or qualities about the management system only and that sort of thing. I think those kind of profound insights make, for me, the book stand out from some of the other work in quality. You know, Yeah, and for me, a real striking thing. Last thing is a real striking thing was this: beware of common sense.
Yeah.
That kind of made me laugh, kind of thing like that, because we tend to have this thing about our gut feelings, and our gut feelings, you know, feel right sometime, but we have to probably evaluate our gut feelings.
Yeah, that Deming comes from the perspective that the quality of the products and services is dependent on the quality of the organization. So if you want to improve quality, you're working on the quality of the organization. People misunderstood his 14 points. One of his points is continuously improve. They think it's continuously improve every individual part, everywhere, all the time. What he says is continuously improve the system of production and service. It's the system you need to improve. And when that improves, the quality will improve. The
Which means you
quality
have to
of product
sometimes
and the
design
service.
better. You have to redesign sometime.
Yeah,
If this is a dance, is that a question of learning how to drum together better?
yeah. Or
If it's about
you might want to bring melody into it.
a tune-up.
Not just dum 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 dum, but some singing going on, some happiness, some innovation. So according to the handy dandy stats where we can end at 4:30, we can actually go on because the machine doesn't shut us off. It sometimes shuts me off because I don't know what I'm doing, but
Well, I need to get off. I get up early, so I'll see y'all next week.
thanks, Lori.
Uh-huh.
Thank you all for your contributions. I'll save the recording if I don't make a mistake, and we'll post it in the next couple of days. So you can go back and listen to what great things you said, or bemoan that you should have done something different. Let's see. The meeting is being recorded. Okay, that's good. Now, somewhere there's a place to save it. One of these buttons is going to let me save the meeting. We'll see if I can find it.
I think it's supposed to automatically go to the cloud,
Yeah,
but
maybe.
I think you have an option to also save it to your computer.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember. It's been 3 months since I last did one of these, so I don't remember the technique. Yeah, I think the recording, if I just stop a meeting, the recording stops and gets placed. Let me see where I am so I can get back to leaving the meeting. I'm a participant. I'm a host. Come on, guys. Where is this thing? Zoom. There we are. Ah, what the heck? There we go. Okay. I push the button. I'm trying to leave. It's not letting me leave. I know I can leave. Mute, spotlight, rename. No, I don't want to do that. What the ding dong?
Probably if we leave, it might help you.
I don't know. Leave me alone to figure this out. Yeah, that'll.
No, because then the meeting will know that it closed. So probably it will.
How funny.
Maybe.
No, I think the Zoom update is sort of horrible because now you could have done something in the background when you're in a Zoom meeting. Now, from the time you switch the screen, it closes you out and all sort of stuff. So, some
Okay.
new settings in Zoom.
Here's a thing that says record. I hit that button. I don't know if that's a save or what it is.